united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to day one of Politico's Competitive Europe Week Summit. I'm Joanna Roberts. I'm Politico's policy editor, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today. Now, we always like to think that our events are timely, but it's fair to say you can't move in the city at the moment without overhearing people talking about competitiveness. And the last month in particular has been peak competitiveness, so the perfect run-up to the conversation that we're going to have over the next 3 days. So September, we had the Draghi report with its detailed prescription of how to make Europe's ailing economy healthy again, including some ideas that may or may not survive contact with political reality, such as common debt and 800 billion euros in extra funding. And seeing as we're at one of the prime Qatargate locations today, if you do find any suitcases of cash, do let us know. We've seen Ursula von der Leyen also make competitiveness a red thread of her new mandate, weaving it throughout her political priorities and also the new commissioner portfolios. But what does this swivel to viewing everything through the competitiveness lens actually mean in practice? How do we go about reviving Europe's economy, cutting regulation, creating European champions, securing our supply chains, reaching our green goals, making the most of technological innovation, and to paraphrase Mario Draghi slightly, getting all the good parts of the US economy while avoiding all of the bad bits? And, of course, where will the money come from? So that's what we're here to discuss over the next 3 days. So before we kick off, I'd like to thank our partners for making this summit possible. We've got our leading partners, Asea, Booking.com, FPA, and Google. Our presenting partners, ExxonMobil, Microsoft, Santander, and Vodafone. Our knowledge partner, the McKinsey Global Institute, and our visibility partners, the German Council on Foreign Relations and the German Marshall Fund. A couple of housekeeping remarks before we start. We do love a good debate, so please do share your thoughts with us on X or your preferred social media using the hashtag #PoliticoCompetitiveWeek. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say. Some of our sessions will include questions and answers, Q&A for our audience here in the room. These sessions are indicated on the programme, and our moderators will let you know when the Q&As will take place. As a general rule, we always like you to keep your questions snappy, avoid statements, and indicate who you are and which organisation you come from. And finally, during our networking breaks, please do come and meet our pro team and enjoy some delicious macarons together in the networking space. And while you're there, explore the rest of the partners' installations and connect with your fellow attendees. And now, I'm very pleased to welcome on stage Kent Walker, President of Global Affairs at Google and Alphabet, for some opening remarks, and then it'll be followed by our panel discussion, From Leader to Laggard, Europe's Quest for Competitiveness, which will be moderated by Carlo Martuscelli, our European economy reporter. Thank you very much. Kent, come on stage.
Thank you, Joanna, and thanks all of you for joining us here today. I'd like to talk to you briefly about competitiveness, of course, artificial intelligence, and then how artificial intelligence can be one of the keys that unlocks greater competitiveness for Europe. Now, because this room already knows a lot about competitiveness, let me start with artificial intelligence and some of the exciting things that we're seeing there. So, artificial intelligence is not new, but we've seen an explosion of new progress. It's burst into public consciousness in new ways. Now, the important thing to note, though, is what is the genesis of this, and what can we do with it? What can it accomplish for us? How can it help the world? Let's start by level setting. We've been working on AI for many years, for over a decade. If you've been using tools like Google Search or Translate or Maps or many other services, you've been using AI. But now we're starting to see AI's potential come in great, remarkable new ways. Let me tell you just one story to illustrate the point, because AI is far more than a chatbot. It is a change in the way we do science. Our AlphaFold team, based in London, worked on the notion of unlocking the potential of human DNA. So 20 years ago, we figured out the key to understanding the sequencing of DNA, but we didn't understand how it expressed itself in different forms of proteins in the real world. There are more than 250 million proteins, and it used to take something like a PhD student 3 or 4 years, an entire thesis, to fold one protein. Well, in fact, now with these AlphaFold tools, our team unlocked the secrets of 250 million proteins in 3 weeks and open sourced that and made it available and is now being used by more than 2 million scientists and researchers around the world. So AI is proving not to be just a scientific breakthrough. It is a breakthrough for creating breakthroughs. It's science at digital speed. And that's accelerating developments, not just in medicine or drug discovery, but also things like material science or promoting work in quantum. So now, for Europe, this represents a huge opportunity, and it could really be a reset button, unlocking new opportunities to increase standards of living, economic productivity, and yes, competitiveness. So we just today released a report, which is available outside, that shows that generative AI alone has the opportunity to lift annual European productivity by between 1.2 and 1.4 trillion euro over the course of the next 10 years. That's increasing annual productivity growth by over 1% a year. That's a remarkable increase if we figure out how to do it right. That's, to put it another way, that would save the average worker something like 2 weeks of work a year, or give you 2 weeks more vacation a year, as you choose. That opportunity is too big to miss. So how do we work through that together to harness the new technology and the resources that Europe brings to the table? That we have right now, as you know, and the subject of this conference and the Draghi report shows, something of a productivity crisis in Europe. We have to think through how to recharge an economy at a time when, in the last 5 years, global GDP has actually grown twice as fast as Europe's GDP. The US economy has grown more than a percentage point a year faster every year since 2010. And over time, that adds up. So whereas in 2010, the economies were roughly the same size, today the US economy is 16% larger than Europe's economy. China's GDP is growing even faster, something like 7.5%. And even India is growing at a rate of more than 6% and catching up. AI innovation can help us reverse that trend. And that's why we are so excited about its potential to drive new productivity, to drive growth, not just in tech, but in all sectors, in retail, in banking, in automotive, in transport, in healthcare, in energy, and more. But those benefits do not come automatically. So what we do next matters. So how do we seize the AI opportunity? How do we deploy the tools and wrestle with their implications? Because obviously they do come with risks of misinformation or misuse or mistakes, like any new technology. But I'd put to you that the biggest risk of all may be the risk of missing out, maybe the risk of missing the opportunity. As Mario Draghi's report laid out earlier this month, Europe has a chance to move from regulatory growth to economic growth. And by building a new policy approach, prioritizing AI, innovation, R&D, and deployment really seize the moment. So let's start out by acknowledging that we're in the middle of a global technology race. And as the slide says, like all technology races, it's a competition that's often won not by the country that invents something first, but by the countries that deploy it the best, that put it to work in action. This practical focus on deployment and innovation is really going to be key to the bloc's competitiveness over the next generation. And the good news is Europe is in a strong starting position for this. You have a well-educated workforce. You have a market that could scale and innovate rapidly. And as Draghi has made clear, the EU needs this new approach to stay current, to stay at the cutting edge, to stay part of this global competitiveness race. So if we change courses, we need to ask the question, not just what's our cyber strategy, but the broader question, what's our digital strategy? And to do that, we need a regulatory framework that actually enables innovation. Now, we have supported the AI Act and various other pieces of legislation, but we also have to recognize that it adds to something like 100 new laws in the last 5 years alone, targeting the digital economy and digital society. Those regulations are well-intentioned, but sometimes they are untested, sometimes they are inconsistently implemented, sometimes they duplicate. And that risks putting off investors and maybe not realizing the full benefits of some of these new technologies. So for small and medium businesses especially, the massive regulations, the red tape, can be too daunting to work through. Not everybody can afford the best lawyers or the compliance measures that are necessary, and the administration, day in, day out, that's necessary to navigate it and make sure that you're complying with all the different rules. So for businesses, for entrepreneurs, this explosion of regulation makes it challenging to develop or launch or sometimes even use new products, let alone become a unicorn. They have the new breakthrough leaders in innovation that Europe should have based on its incredible academic expertise in the population that has the skills, that has the interest in technology. So if we can do this right, we can deliver for Europeans the tools that would make their lives easier and the tools that would make business more successful. So in the past year, Apple, Meta, OpenAI, and Google have had to delay AI product launches in the European Union based on compliance obligations and regulatory uncertainty as we work through some of these different issues. We've long said that AI is too important not to regulate, but the question is, how do we regulate the tech well? How do we regulate in a way that spurs innovation and encourages this new adoption? That's going to take an approach that is balanced, aligned, and targeted. We need to balance risk with reward. When we talk about balance, we have to think about both sides of that equation. Technology has to be developed ethically and responsibly and should be regulated. But Europe needs to reassess the balance between mitigating risks and enabling innovation. For too many years, the emphasis has been on the former, and sometimes innovation and competitiveness have lagged behind. The implication is that we need to be both bold and responsible. We need to protect the public interest and foster an environment where you can have AI innovation, AI productivity. Second, we need to be aligned. We need to recognize Europe isn't operating in isolation. We need to have regulation that works across the common market, but also between the common market and with other regions of the world as we're regulating this new and global technology. Because many countries right now are fighting to use AI to boost their growth and their economic productivity. This will, if we do it right, this will accelerate digitization at all levels and across all member states. So if Europe can work with international organizations to make sure that its initiatives are aligned and review existing frameworks to make sure they integrate with international best practices, that's a win for everybody, most especially for Europe. Now, the transatlantic cooperation element is, of course, an important piece here. A lot of the AI tools are coming from US companies, but we're also seeing innovation coming from China, from the Middle East, from the rest of the world, as well as having some European champions in AI. So even a perfectly deployed digital strategy is going to require a partnership approach to pay off. And we obviously want to work with European companies, European governments to do just that. As we work together in support of shared values, that means that we can advance innovation and best practices seamlessly in ways that benefit everybody. And lastly, we want to be targeted. We want to be focused in how we do this. Don't necessarily reinvent the wheels, but instead focus on the gaps in existing regulation and assess the actual impact of new and existing laws. We've seen an explosion in new regulations in recent years, particularly in digital areas. It's privacy, it's competition, copyright, artificial intelligence. Again, those laws too often overlap and conflict in ways that may hamper growth, may hamper innovation. So just as the US has an Office of Information Regulatory Assessment that reviews the real-world costs and benefits of proposals, or Australia has a Productivity Commission that plays a similar role, Europe would benefit from a similar approach at the implementation stage, testing the impact of new digital rules on all stakeholders. The goal isn't perfection, obviously, especially early on, especially with a nascent technology that's changing so quickly. But there is an opportunity to improve current systems, the current impact of laws as they're being passed and as they're being integrated. The payoff is that if we are able to reduce the regulatory burden, then Europe can have changes that will dramatically enable breakthroughs. But that's going to require an investment in R&D. So it's not just work on the regulatory side. We also have to work on the infrastructure side. That means not only making sure that the hard infrastructure is there, the data centers, the electricity, the transmission capacity, but also the opportunity to make sure that we have R&D investments that are staying level with R&D we're seeing in the rest of the world. So the US is currently spending more than twice as much in R&D investment as Europe is. But Europe also is lagging behind Israel, South Korea, Japan, the UK, China, in its rate of R&D investment in AI. So without the right incentives to make sure that the next generation, the frontier is moving forward, there's a risk of not being able to take advantage of the talent you have in Europe and have your own homegrown tech unicorns. So R&D needs to be a shared priority for governments, working with the private sector and finding ways to make funding more accessible and more easily accessible across boundaries. Now, the second piece of this is also making sure that we have, one more slide, there we go. Also making sure that we have the workforce that can take advantage of the opportunities that are laid by the infrastructure. So if Europe can catch up on infrastructure, the opportunity then becomes making sure that the people of Europe, the workforce of Europe, are ready for this new opportunity. So Google has trained something like 13 million different Europeans in AI skills, and we're working to do more. But we need to make sure that everybody is partaking in this AI opportunity. We have a remarkable chance now to shift into the jobs of the future. It's important to remember that 60% of the jobs we have today didn't exist 80 years ago. That rate of change is likely to continue and maybe even accelerate. The report that we are announcing today highlights the fact that something like 61% of today's jobs will actually be changed by AI, and 7% may be transformed entirely. The workforce isn't necessarily ready for that. So how do we work together? We've put 25 million euro into an AI opportunity fund. Governments throughout Europe need to be focused on this evolution to make sure that we not only deal with displacement, but that we seize the opportunity for all of our people, not just the ones who are necessarily at the cutting edge of work in AI. So if we do that and we put AI skills and education at the center of a revitalized European skills agenda, put it on school curriculums, not just people worry about how AI is going to change education. In some ways, it will force us to change education. But imagine if every student had a personalized AI tutor, if every curriculum was customized for the opportunities of AI. It makes the work of a teacher different, but it makes the learning process much richer and rewarding for students. So through public-private partnership, we can accelerate this work, and we look forward to doing more on that front. So as I mentioned before, we are doing a lot to skill workers directly. We are funding different programs, but ultimately this is a job that governments need to lead on to make sure that we are training the most vulnerable people throughout Europe and allowing everybody to upskill in new and different ways. So this is a critical part of the agenda. If we work through the regulatory side of things, the infrastructure side of things, and maybe most importantly, the people side of things, so that everybody participates in this next generation of progress. So there's a huge amount of work to be done. But we're confident if we work together in support of our shared values, using the complementarity that we have of different advances in different parts of the world throughout the United States, Europe, and elsewhere, we can spur innovation. We can find ways to advance best practices that benefit everybody. We want to be part of that journey. We want to work with all of you, with governments throughout Europe, with companies throughout Europe, and we're committed to working with civil society to make sure that we're striking the balance right as we deploy these fantastic new technologies. If we bring to bear the best of European engineering and the rich cultural legacy of Europe and the cutting-edge academic research from Europe that's actually driven a lot of AI innovations, we're very confident that we'll be able to have global pro-innovation frameworks that promote bold and responsible innovation for everybody. Thank you very much.